and it may not be what you want to hear, but 80% of the French job market is hidden. That means that the roles are not advertised. Salut YouTube! Today's highly requested video is all about finding English speaking jobs in France. This video is really aimed at people who are wanting to maybe move to France or are already living here, looking for a long-term sustainable professional kind of career option. So I'm not really going to be covering nannying, bartending, ski instructor, tour guide, fruit picking, English teacher, all of that kind of stuff. I think that most of you guys are aware that these kinds of opportunities would exist in France. I'm also talking to people who already started their career back in their home country and are moving to France not speaking a word of French. Maybe they're very highly qualified and they don't speak French, or they're just interested in understanding what kind of options there are for work in France. And stay right till the end because I leave my very best and probably most relevant tip for the end of this video. But before we get started, it'd be unfair of me to say that you can easily find English speaking jobs in France and you don't have to speak a single word of French. Of course, even if your work is in English, as mine is for example, all of the informal stuff that happens, you know, at the coffee machine, over lunch, sometimes even in meetings, it can switch to French, and it's really good to be able to speak some French to be able to be integrated with your colleagues. So of course, if you can show your potential future employer that you're super motivated to learn the French language, it's going to be a huge plus on your resume. So before I jump into the video, I just wanted to mention the sponsor of this video, Lingoda, who offer one of the best, easiest, price-effective ways that you can possibly learn French. They offer really flexible 24/7 French language classes online with native French professors. Super easy. And I have done an entire video on this, so I will link it up here. But they're actually running the Lingoda Marathon at the moment, and the doors are going to close on May 13th. So I just wanted to remind you guys of that. The Lingoda Marathon is probably the best way that you can actually like jump up an entire level of your French and really gain in confidence in such a short amount of time. It's effectively a 3-month-long event, and in a nutshell, if you take 30 French lessons per month for the full 3 months, you get a 100% refund. And if that's a little bit too much, you can actually do what's called a half marathon, which is when you take 15 courses per month for the 3 months and you get 50% refund at the end. So it's a super cool opportunity. It doesn't come up very often. It's running this year from May 27th to August 24th, 2019. And if you use my link below and you use my special code SPEAK88, the entry fee will be wiped, so you get the €5 entry fee for free as well. I think there's been something like 10,000 people take part in the Lingoda Marathon. I know that a lot of my viewers have taken part in them, and it has helped them so much to integrate in France, to find work in France. And you can also go and check out their Instagram, which I'll link down below as well if you want to hear some more stories and get some more info on the company itself. But otherwise guys, the Lingoda Marathon, the gates closed on May 13th, 2019. But the spots are limited, so it's better to sign up in advance if you can. So if you're watching this before that date and you're interested in taking your French to the next level, I definitely recommend. So with all that said and done, let's get into the top ways that you can find English speaking jobs in France. Now the first tip that I wanted to touch on is that there are actually dedicated websites for this. So if you're in one of the biggest cities in France, so I'm talking Paris, Lyon, Toulouse, Grenoble, Strasbourg, Bordeaux, there are websites that actually find English speaking roles across the internet and pull them into one place. So one example of this is the website thelocal.fr. It's an online English speaking magazine for people based in France. You've also got jobsinparis.fr, and you'll see once you hit the Jobs in Paris website, on the side you've actually got other cities as well that they have the similar kind of website dedicated to. And another great one is paris.expatriatesmagazine.com/jobs. Now I can't say that I have personally found English speaking jobs on these websites, but what I have done is used my tip number 2, which is around search tactics. So I've used sites like LinkedIn and Glassdoor, and then you've got all sorts of different filters like the kind of professional field you're looking for and all that kind of thing. And I would just literally put in the search bar English speaking, words like global, international, or European, or EMEA, which is Europe, Middle East and Africa, and that's an acronym that a lot of companies use, which means the job is based in France but you're working at a regional level, so the work will be in English. Now you'll see this quite a lot in that the job title might be fully in English and then the job description is fully in French. Don't let this put you off. Often it's like a junior recruiter who's writing the job description and having to list it, and they'll do it in French because they're most likely going to be French. But what you can do is look for clue phrases like anglais nécessaire, anglais impératif, langue de travail anglais, poste en anglais, or maîtresse parfaite de l'anglais. And the reason that you're looking for this is because yes, they're French and they've written the job description in French, but you can get the hint that the job's probably going to be in English, or at least you'll be speaking English a lot of the time. Now, for the same reason, when you're applying for these jobs, you'll always apply with your French CV plus an English CV, just because the first recruiter that's doing the screening is probably French and wants to be able to more than likely read your application in French. It will be quicker and easier for them. Tip number 3 is targeting French companies who are headquartered here in France, but you know have an international presence. So the first place that I went is the CAC 40, which is the French stock market list of basically France's biggest privately listed companies, because they're likely to be big multinational groups headquartered in France. And when you've got the headquarter here in France, that means that the teams looking after Europe and the teams even looking after the international scope will be based here. And that's how I've always found English speaking jobs in France, because I'm working in the international HR team, which means that I'm in contact with different countries around the world in my job, so my job's in English. So of course I will leave a link to that list of companies down below, and that's how I found my first opportunity at LVMH, actually Louis Vuitton Moet Hennessy Group, because I was looking at this list and I was going on each of their websites one by one, and I found a job, and yes, the job description was in French, but it said in the job description that you needed a perfect mastery of English. So I decided to give it a go. I didn't speak a word of French and I got the job. Now, it's not just big multinational groups that you can target as well. It's any French company headquartered in France with an international presence. But for example, I have worked for a music streaming company called Deezer, and it's like a competitor to Spotify, I'd say, an online music streaming service. And when I worked there, they had like 500 employees, 300 based in France, but 200 based internationally. So I got the job able to do the HR for those based internationally, for example. I've also done some work for the French gaming company Ubisoft as well. They don't just produce games in France, of course not, and they're working with global teams from all around the world, and I did some work for them in English. Now, my next tip is to think about targeting embassies, consulates, or these kind of intergovernmental bodies. So for example, you could target the New Zealand embassy, the British embassy, the Canadian embassy. You could also think about the OECD, for example. The OECD, they have 2 official work languages. One is English, one is French, and when you apply for a job there, you just need to speak one or the other fluently. And for the United Nations, for example, I just went onto their website and there are jobs both in French and in English. So maybe think about these kinds of government related institutions. I often find in universities as well, actually, that they need support staff and office staff that can work in English because they run international programs with international students. Now, my next tip may be super obvious, but a lot of people do overlook it. Have you thought about major international companies with a presence in France? So I know people who are working for big gaming companies. So for example, Blizzard Entertainment, you've got British American Tobacco, you've got General Electric, you've got Kraft, big consulting firms like PricewaterhouseCoopers, Boston Consulting Group, McKinsey, also NGOs, so aid groups, global organizations, UNESCO. So targeting these big Anglophone groups or global organizations, and in general, you're always better going on their website one by one, just in case that they haven't gone the extra mile to list the job on LinkedIn or Indeed or whatever. Now, my next tip is, have you considered working remotely? So you can be doing that based in France and obviously paying your taxes in France, but being able to work from basically wherever you like. And there are all sorts of websites where you can find these kinds of opportunities. I can't list them all, but I will put a decent list down below. Some huge ones are like FlexJobs, WeWorkRemotely.com, Jobspresso, Remotey.com, Upwork. I'm gonna list them all down below for you guys to check out and maybe see if you can find anything on there that would maybe suit you. And speaking of this brings me on to my next tip, which is, have you thought of working for yourself? Of course, when we think of working for ourselves, we think it's only something that maybe writers or translators or editors, something like that, could do. If you think about it, you could do almost anything as a consultant, coach, freelancer. For example, if you were working in PR or social media or marketing in your previous life, when you come to France, think about how many French companies would like to have a global social media presence in English. Or working for yourself, are there any services that you could offer that you could really target the English-speaking expat community in France? Could you be an English-speaking relationship counselor, personal trainer? Or, you know, like if it were me, for example, and I really couldn't find a job in human resources, I could maybe offer English-speaking career coaching services. So I could coach people in English, so expats living over here. Or I could coach French people on how to write a brilliant CV resume in English if they want to apply for international jobs, for example. Could you get creative? Could you use your love of baking English cupcakes, for example? It's an interest, it's a skill, it's a passion, it's whatever. And could you run workshops for little French kids to come and learn how to bake English cupcakes, 100% in English, which French parents would love because they want their kids to be able to speak English. Sometimes when you move to a new country, you just have to get a little bit crazy, a little bit creative, and imagine the kind of thing you could do. I have a lot of expat friends who had traditional corporate careers, and now that they're in France, they've become bloggers, they've become YouTubers, they've become coaches, like online coaches or counselors, where they run their meetings using Skype only. So it doesn't really matter where they are based because they're just meeting the person on Skype. If you have any skill, interest, passion at all that you could use to target either tourists in France, expats in France, or French people wanting or needing to speak English for some reason, then that opens up a whole new range of options. Now, I said that I would save the best tip to last, and so here it is. And it may not be what you want to hear, but 80% of the French job market is hidden. That means that the roles are not advertised. And what I've noticed here, and it's so true, is that many people get jobs through their network, through being referred by a friend of a friend of a friend. It's not just your family and your friends, it's the faintest acquaintance who can help you to get an interview. You're so much more likely to get the job. Why? Because workers have so many rights here in France, which is a wonderful thing, but once a company takes a risk and hires you, it's very difficult to get rid of you. And so if someone can kind of refer you, even in the smallest way, it reassures them that someone can vouch for you. And so what I would recommend is to get crystal clear on who you are, what your qualifications are, and what you want, and be really specific. And you have no shame, and you tell everyone you meet. And I know it's not easy, and I know it's not necessarily comfortable, but that's kind of where magic happens. And don't do it in a pushy, salesy way. Just be like, I've got 5 years experience in HR and I'd really love to do human resources at a multinational group. You don't know anyone, do you, who works in HR here in Paris? Don't be like, hey, here's my CV, send it out, but just ask everyone you meet, do you know anyone? Do you know anyone? And create a list of contacts and contact them and ask if they know anyone they'd be willing to meet for a coffee conversation, they'd be willing to just, I don't know, have a quick call, this kind of thing, because you're so much more likely to find a job this way than any other way. Now, the last thing I just want to say is that getting a job in France can be really tough. I know really highly qualified people that have spent over 6 months looking for a job. So you may also want to think outside the box and think to yourself, could I do a year's study here in an English speaking master's program, for example? Could I do an MBA here so that I can do an internship for a company and again, network, and hopefully get a job that way? As frustrating as it is, taking 12 months out of your career path, which is a long career path, you know, we're going to be working for over 40 years, just taking 12 months out in order to set yourself up for the rest of your time in France career-wise can be worth it. So guys, those are the tips that I had for you for this video. I hope that it was useful. If you have any tips of your own, please do mention them down in the comments below, because it will really help anyone else who's watching this video and looking for further tips. And if you guys want to relieve some of that anxiety and actually be able to go into these interviews at least with an intermediate level, conversational level of French, do consider doing the Lingoda marathon that I talked about at the beginning of the video. My links are down below, and my special code SPEAK88 so that you don't have to pay the entry fee. So that's it from me this time, guys. I'll see you in the next video Wednesday. A bientôt!